Welcome folks, welcome to St David's. Welcome to what we hope will be a very interesting and challenging couple of days as we here at St David's share with St Luke's community in this enterprise. We should say thank you to the Common Dreams organisation for supporting us and bringing David here to be with us. Thank you especially for tonight, in the sense that this is continuing the series that St David's began in the beginning of the millennium. It was a series, Ferguson lecture series, that was set out to fill the space initially that the Public Questions Committee of the Church had left open, and it was an attempt to claim some of the public spaces that existed in our society, and especially the challenges that would bring the Academy, the publics and the pews together. It was very special to us in that it was inaugurated in the name of a very much respected minister of St David's, who served and is still serving the church in lots of ways, the Reverend Dr. Graham Ferguson. And Graham, we're very pleased to have you with us again this year. You've been at every lecture and it's been very special for us. It's also been special in a way that it's close to his birthday. 80th birthday, wow. Okay, and it was the 18th.
It is the 18th.
It is the 18th? Yeah. Okay, so we won't sing happy birthday, but congratulations, Graham, on achieving a milestone. We're very blessed this year to have David Galston with us to bring us this lecture, and we welcome the opportunity for this lecture to set off a very interesting couple of days as we explore with David some very big questions about the future of humankind. Firstly, has religion a future? According to a BBC documentary last year, there's apparently a growing number of people worldwide who say they believe that life definitely ends at death, that there is no God, no afterlife and no divine plan. Some of us might tend to agree. However, it's an outlook that could be gaining momentum, it's said, despite its propensity for negativity. In some countries, openly acknowledged atheism has never been more popular as protest against what they perceive to be something no longer required. It's perhaps true that there are more atheists around today than ever before, both in sheer numbers and as a percentage of humanity. However, we need to be careful, and that according to the same claim, the world's estimated proportion of adamant non-believers is still only 13%. While not a majority, it has to be said that the very figures do suggest something is changing in the world's thinking and should be questioned. While it's impossible to predict the future, we can examine what's taking place, asking how our relationship with the divine might play out in decades or centuries to come. It seems to me that if theism has already disappeared, as some would claim, and atheism is on the rise, we might well ask what happens next after atheism, or what happens with God after God, to quote some others. I look forward to this couple of days that begins with the question, has religion a future? And David suggests, I think, that humanity has always lived with religion in one form or another, that it expresses both the greatness of our imagination and the errors of our presumptions. The question for us is perhaps about definitions, as some would suggest that organised religion is at issue here, rather than religion itself, while others would claim that there is no need for anything at all. David also suggests that in Christianity there's a value to the church as a community, yet I think he would want to ask whether the church as we know it can continue to be of value without significant transformation. I look forward to hearing what he has to say about the place of the church in the future as something beyond fundamentalism and its approach to scripture, doctrine and ethical belief. For your information, David is the Academic Director of the West Star Institute, Ontario, Canada, the Ecumenical Chaplain at Brock University, and an Adjunct Professor of Philosophy at Brock. He's also an advisor to the Snow Star Institute of Religion in Canada and the Quest Learning Centre in Hamilton, Ontario. He's played a key role both in Canada and the United States in the development of progressive forms of religion and theology, including being a founding member and chair of the West Star Institute's new seminar on God and the human future. David has published 2 books that I know of, Archives and the Event of God and Embracing the Human Jesus, as well as written several articles for the West Star Institute magazine, The Fourth Hour. And by way of advertising, I remind you again of tomorrow's full-day and exciting event at St. Luke's community. So, we're here, more from David as he addresses the questions. Has Jesus a future? Has God a future? And is there a post-Christian Christianity? So David, without further ado, welcome to New Zealand. Welcome to St. David's. Welcome to the Ferguson Legion.
Thank you for that. What better place for somebody named David to speak than at St. David's? I've never, in my history of giving talks, been invited to talk at a lectureship named after an individual, Graham Ferguson in this case. So I'm very honored to be able to put that on my CV. So Graham, I'll try my best to really make this a great event. There's a story about a Presbyterian minister, a young Presbyterian minister who gave his first sermon at the very first congregation he was at. This is not autobiographical, but it's close. And after the sermon was given, he was very nervous, of course. As anybody who has been in ministry will know, people come by and they shake your hand and say, "Thank you, nice talk." And it was going like that with most people. It was very nice, welcome, thanks for the very good sermon. And then somebody came by and said, the sermon was too long. And so that was a bit of a put off, I guess. And anyway, this continued, people coming by and saying, nice sermon, good sermon. And this individual moved around and was talking to various people, got back in line again, came back to the minister a second time and said, the sermon was too long and you didn't have very much to say. So now this was a bit disturbing, so of course he watched this individual and he noticed that this individual was doing the same thing, going around talking to people, talking to groups, getting back in line and going through congratulations and welcome, and then he comes up for a third time. The sermon was too long, you didn't have much to say, and what you said wasn't worth listening to anyway. So he's distraught, and he calls one of the elders over and says, I thought I did a pretty good job, and everybody seems to be very kind to me, but this one individual over here, he's telling me, giving me these critiques. My sermon's too long, didn't have much to say, and what I had to say wasn't worth listening to anyway. And the elder says, oh, you mean this gentleman over here? Don't pay any attention to him. He's the town fool. He just repeats what everybody else says. So, having said that, I'm going to try a couple of things tonight. One is I don't want to talk too long. One is I don't want to be too repetitive, and I certainly hope that what I have to say is worth listening to. And if it's not, just hang in there, because every time I lecture at the university, I usually do world religion in the context of the philosophy department. My students tell me that the best part of my lectures are when I finish lecturing and I do question and answer. So just hang in there. The Q&A is like really a killer, so you can't miss that. But what we're going to try to do tonight is I've got this sort of introduction to what I want to say, so the introduction is probably longer than what I actually want to say, but the introduction is important because it sort of sets up the climate that we're in with religion. Religion is very hard to define, as you may know. There's no real knowledge about the origin of the word religion, so even the origin of the word religion is as mysterious as religion itself. A lot of people like Augustine's explanation that religion means linking. It's linking up with the divine. But Augustine was, of course, a Christian theologian, and he was interested in salvation. He wanted Christianity to be the means by which individuals link up with God, and that's the meaning of religion. So Christianity is the true religion. But long before Augustine, there was Cicero, a Roman lawyer and a politician and a priest. And he defined religion, and he related it to public reading and to the conduct of ceremony. And that makes more sense to me. That's religion, the word religion in English is related to the history of conducting public service. But neither of those definitions, whichever one you try, doesn't really fit what religion is anyway. So again, that's not important. It's interesting trivia. It's hard to define the word, and it causes us to wonder, what do we mean by religion? And then secondly, even if we understand what we mean, is it worthwhile? Because today, unfortunately, religion has meant anti-something. So it's, anti-human sexuality, or anti-science, or anti-evolution, or anti-progress, or something like that. By the way, my accent is talking about real things. My accent is the real English accent. It's an accent that comes from 16th century England, very close to Shakespeare, 17th century. And it's an American accent, but it's a loyalist accent. It's the Americans that left the U.S. at the time of the Revolution. That's the Canadian accent. So we're the original American accent. So don't look at me sideways. And so we say, Canadians, we say progress, and as you probably know, Americans say progress. And I work in the U.S. and in Canada, so I'm always having to change my accents. And I do want to say one thing. Canadians do not say a boot. Americans say a boot. Canadians do say about. We say it correctly, and we're not referring to our shoes. So, and the Americans also say rough for roof. So you see, they're the ones that got it wrong. And I'm saying this because I want to be in solidarity with New Zealanders tomorrow when you take on Australia in rugby, because Canadians love taking on Americans and beating them. So let's go New Zealand. Okay, now we'll get back to something serious. So it's hard to define religion. And we wonder what it means. Well, in fact, there are two ways, basically, to understand religion. And that's just where my introduction starts. I want to use two words that are a little bit complicated. One is ontology, and one is epistemology. And these two words are two types of religion. And what's happened in our time is that the second word, epistemology, dominates what we mean by religion. I'll be explaining this. And it has led us to this crisis where religion has started to mean only fundamentalism. It's because we've lost ontology. So the word ontology means being, B-E-I-N-G, being, or life. And ontology is the study of life, the study of being. And epistemology means knowledge, and it's the question of how do we know what we know. And both of these types of thinking are characteristic of the heritage of religion in the West. So epistemology is related to covenantal theology, because epistemology involves talking, thinking, explaining custom, ethics, laws, rituals. That's covenantal theology. It's about our relationship to one another and our relationship to the divine. So, of course, Judaism is monotheistic covenantal theology. It's ethical monotheism. That's what it's often referred to as, and it means that it's centered on the relationship we have with one another based on this covenant, this agreement with God. I will be your God, you shall be my people. This is how you're going to live. And so you have to pass on this knowledge, right? Put it on your doorposts, read it publicly, you have to pass on the knowledge. That's epistemology. And so religion involves thinking, explaining, passing on knowledge. The other side of the coin, though, is ontology, which you can talk about as enlightenment. So if the epistemological element is the social element, ontology is the individual element, the element where religion is about coming to self-understanding. And this is closer to what I would call wisdom, religion as wisdom, as enlightenment, as waking up. And it's realizing that you are in the divine is in you, you're related to all things, and you wake up to the world and to life. And on the ontological side, it doesn't really matter whether there's a God or not, or whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, because that's not the point. The point is life. The point is being awake to the world. The point is coming to a sense of the divine within yourself, this nameless mystery that you're born of, and everybody else is born of. And it's not a question of existence, it's a question of the possibility of existence, what comes before existence. So I'm going to go further with this idea. You've got to hang in there. I've got to get this right. I'm going to start using other words now. But I want the basic idea here that epistemology is about knowledge, explaining, reasoning. Ontology is a different kind of knowing. It's not about knowing a thing. It's about waking up to life, to the truth that you already are. All right, let me do a few more words. On the ontological side, the type of knowledge that we talk about usually is called archetypical knowledge. What the heck is that? It's a nice word, and it just means Plato. And it's this kind of knowing. Now, I got to see if I can announce this or pronounce this correctly, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I don't. You have a tree here that I've never seen before in my life. It's a totara tree, is that right? Totara tree? Okay, I'll stop. But anyway, I got close to that. I've never seen it before in my life. But I look at it, and I know it's a tree. How do I know that? So this is archetypical thinking. According to Plato, I know it because at one point in my life, I was enlightened about treeness. I understood it. So I don't have to see every tree to know that a thing is a tree. I already know it's a tree. It's knowledge that I have. I know the archetype of a tree. And according to Plato, the archetype of a tree is the perfection of the tree. So I know the idea of a perfect tree. And a perfect tree, this is even better with Plato, a perfect tree is what? It's a tree that expresses perfect goodness. It expresses the soul of the tree, if you like. It expresses treeness. And when you're enlightened, that's what wakes up in your mind. Treeness. At one point in my life, as a child, that woke up in my mind. And so I can come here, and I can see vegetation that I've never seen in my life, but I still know what it is. And I can see breeds of dogs that I've never seen before, but I know it's a dog. And I can see all kinds of different variations in the world, but I know what they are, even having never experienced them. Because in my life, I woke up, or was enlightened, to what the goodness of a thing is. That's Platonic thinking. Everything has a goodness or an intention. And you can wake up to that, and then you'll always know what those things are, even though there's variation of them, and even if you see things that you've never seen before, you'll still know what it is. So that's ontological thinking. It's based on archetypical thinking. It's based on Platonic, it's called Platonic forms. Now, why is that important? What's that got to do with religion? It's important because once upon a time in Christianity, God was not about God. God was about this kind of thinking, was about enlightenment, was about truth that you already have. So God was not about a being. God was about the foundation of being. God wasn't the noise of religion. God was the silence of religion. God wasn't that you know something. God was the ability to know something. You understand? God was always before everything. God was the source of everything. God was the question before you asked the question. God was the knowledge before you had the knowledge. God was the being who was there before the possibility of being. God was the life of life, the light of light. God was always already there. That was the way Christianity thought about it. You get into Augustine, you get into the Franciscans, you get into some of the mystics of the Middle Ages. They don't want to have anything to do with God. Meister Eckhart, don't even ask about God. If you want to find God, forget about God. That would be Meister Eckhart. If you want to know what God's about, stop asking what God's about. Because you get into the mistake of trying to find a thing named God. Well, there's no thing called God. And that's not what you're looking for in mysticism. You're looking for enlightenment, ontology. And that doesn't have a name. And that's silence. And that's nothingness. And that's called soul. So, now, in order to say all that stuff, I have to use reason. So even though I'm talking about ontology and the silence and what's before religion and what's not God, I still have to reason all that out and explain it, which means I have to engage the other kind of religion. And this is what happened, a little bit of history, just a small amount. As you go along in Christianity, so here you have this kind of combination of covenantal ethical monotheism, which is the heritage of Judaism and Christianity. And you have this Platonic thought, which is a second heritage, and you combine them together in Christianity. And Judaism combines them together too, by the way, because that's what happened in the diaspora with Judaism and then Roman Empire and into the Middle Ages. But anyway, I'll stick with Christianity. You combine these two together. But at some point, right around the year 1000 or so, you start having Islam in Spain, and you begin to approach the fall of the Byzantine Empire in the 1400s, and you have this idea in Christianity that we are not the truth anymore. We are a religion. And there's another one. And now you have to start proving who's got the best religion, who's got the real one. So now you've got the rise of epistemology, of logic. It's inherited partially from Islam and the reception of Aristotle in the Middle Ages. But it's about proving who's got the real God, the true God. So you start using logical arguments to prove the existence of God. Now that's different from ontology, where you don't want to prove You really don't even want to talk about God. But now you do. And so, this is what happens in a nutshell. You argue and you discover that reason is not capable of proving that God exists. This is what reason can do. So this is kind of like Thomas Aquinas now, if you want a name. Reason can lead us from the actual to the potential. In other words, natural reason has the ability to show us what is always potential in the actual. So I see an acorn and I can reason through natural reason experience. I know that an acorn is going to lead to an oak tree. And that's its potential. Now, if you follow that argument, you can go forward with it. Everything that is natural reason lets us observe and understand that everything leads to an end. Everything has an end cause, a purpose. And if you go the other way with that reasoning, you're going to wonder, what the heck are you talking about? There's a point to this, believe me. Hang in there. If you go the other way, every actual thing had something actual before it, and this thing now is the realization of the potential of the act before. So you go back and back and back, and you get to some beginning. You get to the first cause. So reason can take us and say, well, there's a first cause, and reason can take us and say there's an end cause. But reason cannot tell us who the cause is. Oh, who can tell us that? Revelation can tell us. The cause is God. Revelation can tell reason things that reason cannot reach. So now watch what happens with this. That sounds like, oh, that's kind of a boring argument. No, what happens is, okay, where is the revelation coming? Who's got the real revelation? Oh, Christians have the real one. Well, how do you know that? The Bible and the church carry the revelation. God, the Trinity. Reason can't give us the Trinity. The incarnation, reason doesn't give you that. Yes, so now, what happens? The Bible has the authority, and the church has the authority. And what's reason doing now? Reason's trying to prove that a thing called God is carried by the authority of the church and is the answer to the human inquiry. So now you're leaving the Middle Ages and you start to get this division between God, church, society, reason. That's what the Protestants inherited. Protestants were great. Let's give Protestants a hand. They gave us the separation of church and state, based on this thinking. That the church has the authority, the Bible explains the world, the things that reason cannot find out on its own. And reason belongs to the state, to the management of people, to the knowledge of society. Okay, just a little bit further, and then I'm going to stop this, and then I'll actually start my lecture. I told you, this is just the introduction. The problem that we've inherited is this, that through that process of what I would call the falling apart of the ontological argument, or ontology as another form of human reasoning, the consequence of that falling apart was, first of all, that the Bible gained an authority it never actually had before. Before the end of the Middle Ages, it did not have the kind of authority it's given today. That only happened after the year 1000, 1200, 1400, hit the Reformation big time. Now you've got a really heavy Bible. It used to be quite light. It used to be a lot lighter, but now it's like really, really heavy. The second thing that happened is that since you split reason, apart from that, reason goes on its own, and you hit the Enlightenment and science. And what reason wants to say, epistemology wants to say, is that question that started with Anselm. is in the about approximately year 1000. Is there a thing called God? That's the epistemological question. And the answer, we all know, is no. There's no evidence for a thing called God. And so we've reduced religion. Now, today this is our problem. We've got religion as only epistemology, fighting an old battle it had when it had authority, trying to say the Bible does explain the world. The Bible's epistemology. It explains creation. And then, of course, science is going to say, no, that's wrong. Where's the evidence for that? The Bible explains how you're supposed to be a family. Well, it certainly does not. If you've ever read the Bible, there's no good family in the Bible. But anyway, the Bible explains family values. And, and then you're a psychologist or you're working in the medical field and you say, no, it doesn't really do a good job with that. We don't need it for that. So you keep trying to introduce the Bible as authority and as knowledge, but it's on the foundation of epistemology. But we've moved along so far on that foundation that we really don't need religion to do that anymore. It doesn't do it anymore. And if, it's easy to joke about the Bible. If you look for things like family values in the Bible or ethical directives in the Bible, it's miserably failing us in this way. Obviously, because it comes out of the ancient world, and it doesn't have the capacity to reason life the way we're able to do so now. It just doesn't have the same information. See, I'm getting on a tangent. One of the key things, still started the lecture. One of the key points I like to make in the classroom is that for the biblical people, there's no such thing as evolution, there's no such thing as modern science, there's no such thing as sociology, there's no psychology, there's virtually no philosophy. There's various forms of a wisdom tradition in the Bible, but they cannot ask the questions that we're asking because the time is just so fundamentally different. So we have a job to do today. And this is why you have an educated minister. Our job is to go back in time. That's the task of critical thinking and recovering a society that no longer exists. Because that society cannot come forward to us. We have to go back to it and understand it well. And then see if it still has something to say to us. That's not the point I wanted to make, but that was a tangent. Okay, this is the point I want to make. If we try to think about religion again, now not as knowledge, and not as technical knowledge, which is what epistemology is, not as the explanation of how do we know what we know, if we try to rather return religion to ontology, which doesn't involve the question of God, and changes religion from trying to claim a truth to trying to be about truth, then we can change religion from a authority to a negotiation. That's where it starts. So, I'm just about finished as I start. There are ways that you can understand that the role of religion historically was never really to claim truth. It was to place human beings and societies in relationship to nature as a kind of negotiation, as a way of figuring out how to hold your place in life, or how to have a voice in life, or how to act in life. And in some ways, you can carry this out very successfully. And I've thought about this question, and just for this particular trip, I have a third book coming out that has some of the material tonight, but it doesn't have this material. Because my problem is I keep changing my mind. But so I was thinking about this, and this comes out of just the day before I left. So it's as fresh as I can get. And I hope that you like it. But if you think about religion as a way of negotiating, then you can look at the history of religion and you can see these different forms. There's certainly what I would call primal negotiation, worldview negotiation, knowledge negotiation, psychological, and poetic. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to go through that relatively quickly and explain myself and end with the historical Jesus and the poetic. So I'm doing this because I'm now thinking about religion as ontologically valuable, but not as epistemologically authoritative. And that means I'm going to look at religion as a human creation, as a way of negotiating our lives, and valuing the history of that process. So one of the ways we do that, human beings have done that, is this primal level of relationship to nature. And I've been around here and been told a lot about the Maori and compared that to First Nations in Canada. And I've sort of interested in primal expressions of humanity, if you like, primal spirituality. And it is very much about negotiating with nature and figuring out your place and how you're going to make the relationship and how will nature be happy with you, and how can you be happy with nature, and what position do you have in relation to this sort of primal image of nature as our parent, our mother, or our creator. The other one is worldview, and I think so primal is often called animism, but I would prefer the word primal myself. But then what happens is you start to get this worldview, religion as worldview, and this is the great accomplishment of the Roman Empire, where religion, their system is really about in managing a massive political ideology. And so religion for Rome is about inducing loyalty in other nations, recognition. So in other words, it's how you view the world. And this is tough for religion, because a lot of its history has been about that. You conquer, and you give religion, and you try to make the person that you've conquered, or the nation that you've conquered, see the world as you see it. So religion becomes forceful. And a lot of the history of religion is that. But then the third, and so that's worldview is like negotiating with God, this is how we're going to be, and then kind of trying to make people see the world the same way you do. A lot of religion involves that. Now, knowledge, after empires and you get in the Middle Ages, you do get religion, Christianity, claiming itself to be knowledge. We just went through that. Bible is knowledge. The Bible used to explain the world, used to explain the origin of language, used to explain how the planets were. So religion had that kind of form of negotiation. Now I'm going to get into the Enlightenment period, so I'm doing this very quickly. Psychology. Liberal Christianity became religion as negotiating one's psychology, understanding our sin, forgiving ourselves, self-acceptance, self-empowerment. That was all liberal Christianity, 17th, 18th, 19th century. In the 20th century, you probably heard it. I bet you some of you grew up with it. You know, you learn to accept yourself, forgiveness, self-love. That was religion, and you kind of negotiating your psychological position. But now comes this fifth one. And this is the one that I'm hoping works for us today. Religion as the poetic. The poetic is using religion, celebrating it, as a way of altering our view of the world. Using it like it's a piece of art, like it's a different way of understanding things, like it opens up a possibility, a change. Okay, here's my example. You ever heard of the parable of the treasure hidden in the field? And there it is, that treasure. And you've heard the lesson. God is like this great treasure that you should get. It's so valuable. give away everything you have and buy that field so you can get the treasure. And I'll bet you're just persuaded by that. And now, here's somebody else in the Bible heard that parable, or read it, or encountered it, and wrote another parable just like it. This isn't a historical Jesus parable, but it's the pearl of great price. The pearl of great price is an interpretation of the treasure parable. Sell everything you have and get that pearl because it's so valuable. The person who wrote the pearl of great price was fooled by the treasure parable. And I'll bet most of us are fooled by that treasure parable. It's trying to fool us. Because this is what it does. It convinces us that what we want is treasure, right? A treasure hunt, a lottery, win the lottery. What else could you want? Sell everything you have, buy the field, get the treasure. But the problem is, that field is not your field. It's somebody else's field, and it's somebody else's treasure, and the moral thing to do is to tell the owner that the treasure's in the field. That's what you're supposed to do. But you get sidetracked in that parable by the treasure. And you interpret it like the pearl of great price. I want the treasure. You get sidetracked by our own natural drive of greed, of wanting to own, wanting that for ourselves. Now here's what the parable does, and this is religion as poetic. Why are you like that? How did you get taken in like that? How did you lose yourself? What made you think you needed the treasure? That you should lie? Shouldn't the world be different? That's religion. Now, do you notice? There's no God in that story. There's no God anywhere in that story. Because it's ontological religion. It doesn't need God. It's life. It's religion as the story of life and the vision of life. It's religion as the poetry of life, as the alternate form of living, as the possibility of a different kind of life. Now, just to say a few words about somebody that you'll recognize, a song that's religious. And it goes like this. Imagine there's no hell. Imagine above us only sky. Imagine no possessions. Maybe you'll say I'm a dreamer. But I hope someday you'll join us. And the world will be different. That's ontological religion. No need for God. No argument about does God exist. That's such a boring question. But it's religion. Because it's the poetry of life. The possibility of difference. That's religion. I think it still has a value for the human family. Thank you.